Hi, everybody. I had to escape my house because my daughter's got diarrhea. My wife's got influenza. I told her, listen, lady, go get 14 flu shots. She didn't want to listen. She didn't want to get vaccinated. She's an anti-vaxxer. No, I'm just kidding. But they're sicker than dogs and cats right now. Poor them. So I escaped the house. I'm over at a buddy's house recording ads. This episode was incredible with Thaddeus Owen. Like, these are the kind of people that the masses need to hear from because they are on the ground level, putting in the work, doing the research, and it's beyond doing research and doing a lot of reading. They're able to comprehend it and recycle it through words to your ears. There's a big difference of just the lay person hearing something and then the fish getting bigger when they tell the story. No, these people can just break them down intelligently. That's why we are very lucky to have been able to sit down with Thaddeus Owen from primalhacker.com. He hooked me up with these headphones before I left his house on Friday. And they're meant to keep the radiation out of our heads. We talked about so much in this episode about light therapy, about 5G technology. That was very interesting. So I hope you all enjoy the show, and I'll cut this short. Last week's ads were quite long. I also want to thank our partners for this episode. Obviously, primalhacker.com, but Soltara Retreat Center, your go-to ayahuasca retreat center for the Western world. Down in Costa Rica, Soltara is providing the juice, the goods, the medicine to the Western world. And don't get me wrong, I met some awesome New Zealanders, Australians, Germans, UKalians down there from all walks of earth. They go down to Soltara, and you should too. There's a big retreat coming up with, yet again, Dr. Dennis McKenna, a stationary astronaut alumni. He will be down there in late April through early May. Make sure you go onto the Soltara retreat page on Facebook or go to their website, soltararetreatcenter.com. Go check it out. Make sure you stay dialed in, folks. We're going to keep these kind of conversations rolling. That way we can educate you. This was, in a nutshell, what I love about the Joe Rogan experience, because he brings in the most interesting minds on the planet, and he has deep philosophical conversations with them that will push our culture forward and push our knowledge base forward. One thing we talked about on this episode is how we can't unlearn what we're learning nowadays because of technology and the spread of information. So what that means is we are forced to advance quickly and pretty much grow up. I didn't know, I thought Y2K, when it happened, I thought the world was going to end or some shit. No, what Y2K was the spawning of a new existence, a paradigm shift because of the internet. To the point now where information is spreading so fast, we can't unlearn what we're learning on a daily basis. There's a mathematical equation that I am too dumb to even interpret for you, but it goes something like this. Each day, we are gaining more information than all the other days up until a certain time frame combined. So I think it's all of human history up until 2003, plus that day, we are advancing. So it's just exponentially growing to the point we are never going to be able to unlearn all of this, and it's forcing us to grow up very quickly. So with that being said, enjoy the show with Thaddeus Owen. I just about called him Dr. Thaddeus Owen. He's actually not a doctor, but he's still probably one of the smartest people you could ever possibly meet. So with that being said, I love you guys. Make sure you go get those prof tickets. They're selling out. Go on to Eventbrite. put in Prof Rochester. It'll pop right up. It's selling out, so make sure you get on that wagon. Thank you to All Star Basements, as well as Fulton Beer. We'll give them a shout out. They are two of our presenting partners for Prof Rochester, Pookie Baby Spring Break. Go look it up. I love you guys.
I'm gonna be high as a fucking man.
And now, the stationary astronaut.
Dr. Thaddeus Owen, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. How are you, Nick?
Dude, last time we sat down, it was one of those conversations I wish we would have had Mike set up.
For real.
Because me, you, and Nikki Baby, we went so deep.
That's right. That's what we do.
It was like, I didn't even know what to expect.
All or nothing.
Yeah, it was all or nothing. Now this was, let's get you in that microphone a little bit more, because we want to make sure we get all the goods. Now, this was pre your fire and ice retreat.
That was, yes.
Can you explain to people what you were doing with the fire and ice retreat?
Yeah, so I run a business called Primal Hacker, and we basically create this intersection between ancestral practices, ancestral optimal health, and then modern science. And we teach people who live in a modern world, a modern lifestyle, an indoor lifestyle, how to be optimally healthy in today's world that bombards them with microwave radiation and artificial lights and pollution, all this stuff. So the Fire and Ice Retreat was our first attempt to get people to come to northern Minnesota in the winter in February and get really uncomfortable by learning how to cold adapt in a local environment.
Did you guys do any like heat therapy at all either?
Of course. So fire and ice. So we had the fire part of it. So we actually had lots of real fires burning in the fireplace the whole time and outdoors. Yeah. So we had one dinner, Ice Age, Ice Cave, ancestral dinner that was 100% outside, included a spitfire, a roasted lamb, the entire lamb that Nick put on the fire. Yeah. So we had that, but we also had sauna. So we had heat from heat shock proteins, getting all the good juju from the sauna, from all that, increasing longevity, increasing telomere length, and then getting ready to get really cold in the lake, frozen lake that the ice was 3 feet deep, that we had to drill through. So yes, we were in the sauna, we were getting warm. We had red light therapy inside, which was part of the fire as well the entire time, and red lights only on at night.
Okay, so we're going to stay in the pocket because you are doing a lot of study with light right now as a quantum physicist, correct?
That is correct. I'm not a quantum physicist, but I study quantum physics and quantum biology.
Okay, so what would your label be then as a doc?
So I'm not a medical doctor or a PhD. I have a master's in holistic nutrition.
Okay.
I have a bachelor's in chemical engineering. So I'm trained in physics, engineering, chemistry, and also nutrition and human biology and anatomy and physiology.
Well, I don't care about what paper says you're a doctor in my eyes.
Everybody actually mistakenly puts Dr. Owen on all the invites and events that I do. So I'm usually at events speaking to medical doctors, giving CEUs, and they put me down as Dr. Owen. So that's just fine.
Now, you're bringing up ancestral. Do you guys take blood tests to find out where people stand prior to these retreats?
We don't, but typically the people that are in our community do 23andMe or ancestral DNA testing. Mm-hmm. So you spit into a tube and you send it out and you get your DNA report. That has a really big deal. It's a really, really important to know your ancestral mitochondrial DNA, not your nuclear DNA. So you may be, from Africa or Germany or wherever it is based on your DNA, and that's your nuclear DNA. But we want to know your mitochondrial DNA story, and that determines what environment you need for optimal health. So many people did do that before the Fire and Ice Retreat, and if they did, it makes it that much better where we can help them get optimally healthy from the cold adaptation and light therapy.
So I did an Ancestry.com thing last year. So what would I be providing you with out of that? Is that mitochondrial?
Yeah, so most of those reports, I know for sure 23andMe, but there's a number of others that also you are looking for your haplotype. So if you just look up for haplotype report, or you look up your reports and find the dropdown for haplotype, that's what you want. And it's made up of either 1 or 2 codes. So L0 would be like an equatorial haplotype. H1A1 is my haplotype, my mitochondrial haplotype, and that is like a Northern European haplotype.
Okay.
And that tells you if you have coupled mitochondrial DNA, meaning you need sun and light, or uncoupled mitochondrial DNA, meaning your DNA has been designed based on where your ancestors live to uncouple from making energy to making heat to keep you warm in the winter.
What places on the planet would be uncoupled?
Yeah, so basically outside of the 20s, we're talking latitude. So the latitude starts at the equator of latitude 0. And as you move north or south, it increases in latitude from 0 to 20 to 30 to 40. So here we are right around Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're at about 42 to 44 degrees latitude. Anything in the 20 to 40, or actually 20 to 80 degree latitude, you're talking uncoupled DNA, if that's where your mitochondrial DNA is from.
Wow. Have you ever built a sweat lodge?
I have never physically built a sweat lodge myself, except when I was a kid, with sticks and doing survival courses where I had to live in the woods for 2 days and making my own shelter. I made like a quasi sweat lodge, but not a for real like ancestral sweat lodge.
Now you brought up a sauna. I use a steam room every day. Can you kind of break down the difference obviously between steam and like a dry sauna, but what is it doing to our DNA? Is there a difference in it? Because I know Dr. Rhonda Patrick does say that saunas are better than steam rooms. Can you kind of break that down?
Yeah. And so what you're looking for when you do these practices of heat is you're looking for heat shock proteins to be produced. And we believe, and Dr. Rhonda Patrick believes, that the benefit of getting hot is the heat shock protein, which increases longevity, increases your cardiovascular endurance, decreases your response to hot or cold. So that means your core body temperature when you're exercising and you start getting really hot, that won't get as hot if you're heat adapted or cold adapted. So is dry sauna different than, steam room? They're different. And I would imagine, the reason Rhonda is saying dry sauna is better is because you want to sweat and become uncomfortable. The benefit of these heat shock proteins comes when you start getting really uncomfortable. For some people, that's 10 minutes, and some people, it's going to be 30 minutes, depending on your mental capacity, depending on how you've adapted. But the steam room is made up of steam typically from tap water. So when your pores are opening up, your blood is coming to the surface to sweat, toxins can move really easily into your skin and into your blood. And when you're using steam from tap water that has chlorine, pharmaceutical compounds, fluoride, and then there's these combinations between pharmaceutical compounds, chlorine, and an agricultural runoff that form in the water. None of those things are cleaned up in tap water. So if your tap water has those toxins, they don't clean them up or take them away, and now you're absorbing them through your skin.
That's kind of been a big thing for me in late 2018, early 2019. I've always been just adamant about not drinking tap water, stay away from tap water. Now we're just fully focused on filtering all of it, even our shower water. Just because I think we're all guinea pigs right now. And last year, the Mayo Clinic had a big scare with contaminated water.
Really?
Yeah, for I think 3 weeks until they got the problem figured out. No employees and no one could drink water in the St. Mary's area.
Wow.
And that doesn't just go away.
Yeah.
It typically just gets hushed up. Now, they might fix the problem on campus there, but what about all the residents who live in all the houses around? Because I know the city lines stop at the boulevards. What about all the houses with the old piping?
Right.
Our 1950s houses, 1940s houses.
They're all that infrastructure from almost all over the country is so old with the old lead piping and everything is just seeping in there, running out. Who knows what it's contaminated with? So I always recommend. So I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry for 10 years. And I 100% recommend that everybody get a filter for sure on your water that you drink. Okay, but what most people don't understand, and you mentioned this whole house filter or a shower filter, your skin is your largest organ on your entire body. So no matter how much water you drink, you're never going to absorb as much toxins and pollution than your skin will when you take a bath or a shower.
Yeah.
So that's what you've got to think about is whole house water filter, or at least filtering your shower or your bath water. That's almost a bigger deal than what you drink. Although I still tell everyone you've got to filter your drinking water or you're just crazy.
So people use Flint, Michigan as an example. Man, we got Flints all over the place. They're just yet to be exposed.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things when you realize if you get water from the ground, from an aquifer that's untouched, like we do a lot here in Minnesota and Wisconsin, that's great. But not everyone gets that. Yep. Often people are using, Mississippi water from the river they're trying to clean it. So they clean it, but they clean it for bacteria and funguses and microbes, but they don't clean it for pharmaceutical compounds. And we know 3M is one of the largest companies here. And for who knows how many years, decades, they were dumping toxins, pollutants directly into the Mississippi River. So they were pumping about 2,000 gallons per day, every single day, out of this aquifer because they had contaminated it with toxic waste so that it wouldn't go into the aquifer, and they were dumping it into the Mississippi River. And they had been doing that for decades. And so you think about doing that for decades and putting it in the Mississippi River, and then you're drinking that water, and you might be cleaning it up for bacteria, but you're not cleaning it up against all of those other things. So you've got to really get on the program of getting a water filter.
We apologize, Louisiana. Sorry. My bad.
if it even makes it that far anymore. But yeah, anyone south of us.
Can you, so I really want to get into the light studies you're working on right now, because how you broke it down for me, and I was honestly too dumb to even have that conversation that day. I'm just going to ask these questions that would come out of the layperson's mouth. Now, in regards to how you broke it down, typically as a consumer of light, I consider what I can see. You're studying light we can't see that affects our mitochondria.
Yes.
Break that down.
And not just, it affects everything in your body, not just your mitochondria. So there are claims of the stuff that I'm researching. What we're seeing is every single mental disease, depression, anxiety, ADHD, all of that can be fixed with sunlight if you are getting outside. So this is something that just is so new to most people. It's like medication, get people to run around. No, it's actually the light. And when people think of light or sunlight, they think of a couple things. Light they can see, so the pretty colors of the rainbow, and those are all important, and they all actually do different things in the human body. And then invisible light. And invisible light is things that you can't see, and what we call a quantum xeno effect. So it's this technical term, but all it means is something that you cannot see, detect, or measure is causing massive changes or differences or benefits to your body. And if you were to measure that, it actually changes the effect. So this is this invisible light effect.
Is that because you're aware of it?
Yeah, there's this really weird concept in quantum physics of when you become aware of something happening, it can only happen in one way. Quantum physics, so there's this example in quantum physics where a sunlight particle in a plant can hit a plant or it can hit the human body, and there might be, let's say, 1 million different pathways that photon of light can travel to do photosynthesis in the plant. What it does is it travels all 1 million pathways at the exact same time and then chooses the fastest pathway for life to occur. That happens 1 million times, 1 billion times, 1 zillion times a day without anybody seeing that. And if we were to observe the quantum effect, that photon would no longer go all 1 million directions and then find the quickest path. It would only go in one direction, which may not be the fastest path, and then photosynthesis falls apart. So this is something that is really odd about and really hard to wrap your mind around for quantum physics. But what's going on is these invisible lights do impart information to our body. So that information is critical for us to maintain health, and most of us don't even know what's going on, and we remove ourselves from the outdoor world and put ourselves in the indoor world where we're still absorbing tons and tons of information from light, and we don't even know it. So think about your cell phone. Your cell phone wirelessly transmits data when you send a text from you to whoever you sent the text to. How did it go from the air to the satellite to the other person's cell phone? On a particle of light. So that wavelength, whatever the gigahertz is that you're running your cell phone off, is just a different wavelength of light. And it's got a ton of information in those packets of light. Well, sunlight and light inside our homes has tons and tons of information that our body decodes and uses to become healthy or not healthy. And when we hide ourselves by covering up and then staying indoors, we lose all those invisible wavelengths of the sun that are providing information to our body that we are designed over hundreds of thousands, millions of years. And we miss out on all of that. And we start to wonder why we have ADHD and mitochondrial disease and all these other things.
Could that affect our DNA and be passed on to our down our lineage?
It can affect both your nuclear DNA, which can affect your genome and then what goes on to your kids. And it can also affect your mitochondrial DNA. It actually affects your mitochondrial DNA more. And if you look up a researcher, his name is Dr. Doug Wallace, Dr. Douglas Wallace. He is a researcher that has found that our mitochondrial DNA are the number one most important thing in determining our health. And it's not our nuclear DNA. Everyone is studying nutrition and all the pollution from the wrong angle. They're looking at how it affects nuclear DNA, but it's actually mitochondrial DNA we need to look at.
Can you break down the difference between the two?
So the question is like, yes, the wrong type of light can damage our nuclear DNA, which then changes or deforms what we pass on to our children. So that answers your first question. So the difference is, like, when we think of our genes and what we pass on, we have like so many genes. And those genes code for proteins in the body, and that makes all of our cells and determines kind of what our body looks like and what we become, especially when we're younger. So those are the genes that everyone knows we pass on, and you get half of those from your mom and half of those from your dad. And when you have a baby, because they get half from mom and half from dad, everyone assumes that everything in their body is kind of half and half, but that's not true. Mitochondrial DNA comes only from your mother. And so most people are completely unaware when they think of the DNA in their body. Mitochondrial DNA come 100% only from your mother and her mother's mother and her mother's mother. And so the difference between the two is your genetic DNA is in the center, the nucleus of your cells in your body. Mitochondrial DNA is in the mitochondria that are in the body. And the mitochondria are the energy centers of the body. They produce all the ATP, which is this energy carrier. They actually do lots of other things that most people don't study, but is well known. And the mitochondria are more prevalent in our brain and our heart because they need the most energy. That's where they should be. But we've got thousands and thousands of them in our cells all over our body to make our muscles contract and pick things up. That's what the mitochondrial DNA do. The nuclear DNA code for proteins and hormones and some of these other things. But it's the mitochondrial DNA that determine if we're going to get cancer, if we're going to get a mitochondrial disease, if we're going to get sick. That's all now being discovered to relate only to the mitochondrial DNA. And almost nobody is studying that right now.
And it's coming from the mother?
All your mitochondria in your body come only from your mom.
What?
Which is just like,
what?
So wherever your dad is from, wherever the rest of your DNA is from, makes no difference when it comes to mitochondrial DNA. So if you want to know, how do I keep my mitochondria healthy? It's different from person to person based on where your mother's ancestors are from.
Oh man, I've got so much Canuck in my blood. So much Montreal Canuck.
That's where your mom is from, huh?
Yeah, that's where my grandmas are from. And they're all just a bunch of French-speaking goofballs. We'll see. None of them have tans. That explains why I get so sunburnt. A lot of skin issues in my family.
Yes. So that again relates to mitochondria, but you can change that. So that is one common fallacy where people say, and they call this Fitzpatrick skin type. So people say, oh, I'm Irish, right? And so if I go outside, I have like two colors, white or red. You know, I burn or I stay out of the sun. Yep. We have found, and this is through my own experience and through testing of hundreds, thousands of others, you can create a solar callus. And it doesn't matter if you're Irish, French, Canadian. What you do is you go outside at sunrise, within 1 to 2 hours of sunrise, as many mornings as you can, with as much skin bared as you can. You can actually buy these tan-through shorts called Kaniki or Cool Tan.
Okay.
So you can actually be naked without being naked. Your neighbors will love you a little bit more when you're wearing pants.
Sorry, Janice.
Exactly. I'm wearing pants today, I swear. And so when you do that, when your body absorbs light in the morning within an hour of sunrise, there's no UV light within an hour of sunrise. That means you're not going to get burnt, but you're going to be absorbing a ton of red and infrared light.
And it won't fry your eyeballs either.
Yes, that is correct. If you're ever going to do anything about sun gazing or staring at the sun, so the sun is amazing for your eye health. Now, I never recommend anyone stare directly at the sun. I may do that, but I don't recommend anyone else. So you stare 15 degrees below or to the side of the sun is what's recommended safe. And there's actually tons of benefits because you have all these aromatic amino acids. They're basically these amino acids your body produces. They're present in your eye. They get programmed by that information we just talked about from sunlight and later become thyroid hormone, melatonin, all these things that people have messed up. I can't sleep. I have thyroid issues. Guess what? You need to be getting out in the morning sun to program that hormone in your body, or it's not going to happen right. All the drugs in the world aren't going to fix it.
That's the new thing, hypo or hyper, which one runs in your family.
Exactly. And it's all because we have this indoor lifestyle and we're exposed to artificial lights instead of natural sunlight.
Okay.
So anyway, building a solar callus. Get outside for 5, 10, 15 and increase the amount of time every day that you're out in the sunshine. Of course, it's really hard to do in the winter. You can do it with red light therapy devices in the winter. The more red and infrared light you absorb, the more UV light you can absorb at noon. And we've seen this to the effect of, I've been doing this for an entire summer, absorbing all the morning light, and then I can be outdoors for 10 hours with no clothes on in the brightest sun possible, and I will never, ever get burnt. So we did this in New York City and Boston this year. My girlfriend and I went from New York City to Boston. I had no shirt on for 9 hours in the sun. We met some friends that were with us for 1.5 hours, and they had to go home because they were so burnt, and they didn't get out of bed the next day because they were so uncomfortable. That was an hour and a half. We were out for 10 hours without clothes on, and we never got burnt because we absorbed so much early morning sun.
So that's the callusing you speak of.
That's called a solar callus, and it's building a solar callus to be protective. And there's actually plenty of research papers showing that. You're basically protecting yourself against sun later in the day.
Now, the final hour of sunset also does not produce UV that will burn your eyes.
That's correct.
So could people, if they miss the morning, could they do the night?
Yeah, we always tell people the morning is most important because the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 2017 was given for circadian biology.
Okay.
Because it has such a huge impact on your health. Circadian biology is set 100% by getting out in the morning sun. So that's why we say that's most important. But that is correct. Within an hour of sunset, there also should be no UV. And then that is also okay to, if you're ever going to look at the sun, which I don't recommend people do, that would be the time to do it, or to get as undressed as you can in the sun. That's considered way safer sun exposure at those times because there's no UV. Now, if you do get burnt during the day, the way to mitigate the sun, so the way to not get burnt from the sun is to use the sun. So you get morning sun, you won't get burnt at noon. The way to alleviate a sunburn is, again, to use the sun. So if you get burnt during the day, you get sunset sun, and it will help reduce and alleviate your burn.
Ah, wow.
Very important, and most people never think about, oh my gosh, I got burned, I'm going to stay away from the sun. You actually want to get back out in it. It just depends on the time.
Ooh, that's science, bro.
That's science right there, baby.
Now, we skipped over an important part, grounding yourself while you're sun gazing. Can you break that down for people?
Yeah, so you mentioned the concept of grounding, and some people don't really know what that is. But so grounding is not like when you send your kid to their room with no dinner. It is this concept of, so if you think about your hand and your feet, they sweat, right? And most often people sweat more from their hands and feet than other places. The reason we have these sweat glands and sweat ducts in our hands and feet is because we want to absorb electrons from the earth. That is what we mean when we say we're grounding, is we are barefoot on the earth. And when we're barefoot on the earth, we have the ability, if we're not standing on man-made environment like asphalt, we have the ability to absorb electrons directly from the earth, which is the largest source of electrons that we know of. When we absorb those electrons, they reduce our inflammation because we're dumping positive charge. Positive charge in the body is inflammation. And when we absorb those negative charged electrons, we build what's called our redox, our capability to maintain optimal health.
All right, back to your scheduled programming. Okay, so you were talking about grounding and what goes on underneath our feet.
Yeah, so we have these sweat ducts because when we sweat, we actually conduct more electrons across that surface. So we're designed to take in electrons from the surface of the earth, which powers our body. So if we think about how energy is made in the body, it's made through the mitochondria, which we talked about, and it's made through a system called the electron transport chain. The electron transport chain takes electrons from point A to point B. And as those electrons pass through there, they create energy. The way you get electrons in your body is most people think of through food, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So the more food we eat, the more energy electrons we have. We can actually get 1/3 of our electrons from food and 2/3 of them from sunlight. That means we can get 2/3 of our daily energy directly from sunlight, granted that we are connected to the earth, absorbing more electrons and receiving that photonic light information from the sun. We can build energy in our body just from that, almost like a plant, without any food. That is often why we eat less food during the summer, and we have to eat more food during the winter because we're disconnected from the earth in the winter and we're not outside anymore. So most people have to eat more in the winter to provide enough energy. The more food you eat, usually the fatter you're going to get too. So we got to watch that.
That makes so much sense because as we talked about the first conversation we had, I didn't know the 2/3 part from the sun energy. And it was in regard, I read a book on sun gazing, and it was all about for 9 straight months, you go up in 10-second increments. First day, 10 seconds, second day, 20 seconds, and you go up. You end up at 44 minutes after that 9 months. We obviously can't do that here.
No.
But it made so much sense because by the end, your end game was you don't need food at all. You just need water and more sunlight.
Exactly.
And it makes so much sense as to kind of the path Jesus took that everyone talks about it, the Son of God.
All these enlightened individuals some way incorporate the sun, which we are taught today by dermatologists and others to be afraid of the sun and to think that it's toxic. The sun is what powers our earth and always has for 4.5 billion years. Do we really think that that is dangerous and toxic? There is no way. We're designed to live under the sun. Now, when you're grounded, there's another effect. When your feet are grounded on the surface of the earth and you're within that earth's magnetic field, there's something called the photoelectric effect. So when a photon hits the body, it excites an electron, and that electron can then pass on light information and energy from that photon hit. And you can slow down light when you're connected to the earth. So what happens is when light slows down, think of Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. If you slow down the speed of light, you have to increase something on the equation called mass. That means that as light slows down, we create mass. We create things in the body that didn't exist. That's what we're creating our dopamine, hormones, and other things. We're creating these hormones and dopamine, and we're programming the body for optimal health. We don't get any of that when we're disconnected from the earth.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. That's a mind blower right there.
We're creating matter from light, almost like photosynthesis. This is animal photosynthesis.
Oh, man, that needs to be broke down in a 59-second YouTube video.
For sure.
To get people outside, to force them outside. Because what are we losing nowadays? We're dealing with it now. Kids are here. We're in the middle of the winter. It's cold outside. This is the toughest day to push your kids outside. But growing up, it was get outside, don't come home until the 6 o'clock bell goes off, then we'll eat.
Exactly.
And that's all we did, round the clock. And nowadays, we're told the boogeyman's out there.
Yeah, you're told that don't go outside when it's cold because you're going to catch a cold, which is 100% false. That's not even a thing. There's no science, but even medical doctors. So my mother's in the medical profession, and the medical doctors will tell me, like, you can't be outside shoveling snow without a shirt on. You're going to catch pneumonia. And it's like, that's not even a thing. That's not how it works.
So why doesn't it work like that then if that's what we're told?
Yeah, of course. Well, if we think about like how things like that are passed, they're passed by viruses. And viruses, you have to come in contact with a virus. And not just that you come in contact with a virus to get sick, you have to have a depleted immune system and not be able to fight it to get sick. So 10 people can get the virus for pneumonia, and only one person is going to actually get pneumonia because their immune system is so compromised. Going outside actually boosts your immune system. It's the exact opposite of what we're told, but it's just like people want this warm, comfortable 72-degree environment from the time they wake up till they get in their car, in their garage, till they park at work, go to the gym, go to the store, come back home. They've never gotten cold. They've never gone outside. And we get used to that and we think like, oh my gosh, you're going to get cold. And sure, you can get pneumonia if you have a compromised immune system because you're outside for far too long and you let yourself get super chilled. And once you do that, you can't fight things off as well. But we're just talking about a way to cold adapt so that you are stronger from being outside, not weaker.
Wim Hof hasn't been sick since 1993. You know what I'm saying?
That guy is insane. But you know what? So Wim, if you look up Wim Hof, he's got a special breathing method that he coaches people in. And he's an amazing guy. That's right. Fully in, out.
And it's crazy. His breathing technique is based on pi.
Yes.
It's insane.
Yeah, all the sacred geometry and numbers are somehow related, right? And so I love it. He studied so much yoga and Kundalini, and he put all these pieces together. What's awesome about Wim, whether you do the breathing or not, is he gets people to use the cold to their benefit, and he gets people outdoors. The combination of breathing, outdoors, and cold is miraculous in the way you can control your immune system to be far healthier. So they've done things like inject Wim with toxins, like known toxins like E. coli, and they don't affect him because he can manipulate his nervous system to such a degree based on these things that he does that he can tell it to fight this off where everyone else that is injected with that will get sick. I mean, it's crazy.
Be like Wim. The crazy thing is, if we weren't a bunch of lazy SOBs, and I'm just figuratively macro speaking, we could all be like him. If we just put in the work. The best my brain has ever clicked was when I was consistently doing the Wim Hof method for an entire winter. It was allowing me to do these super feats that I never thought were possible. That's where Stationary Astronaut came from. The brand Stationary Astronaut came from a winter of doing the Wim Hof method.
Really?
You know, and then my first shirt I made was the Wim Hof edition.
Oh my gosh.
You know, and it's something where Wim could be in a nutshell, he's a cult leader. If you are, and he's a good cult leader, he doesn't even chime into his group on Facebook. It's just a bunch of members chiming in. His method has kind of, thank God for the internet and Joe Rogan, because it's taken the world over by storm. Now everybody's pushing their limits, and it's brings on the likes of scientists who actually know what they're talking about, like yourself, who can run these retreats properly where people don't die under anyone's watch.
Exactly. And that was one of my main concerns is, you know, we had people come from Australia. So 114 degrees when they left. And when they got here, it was 30 degrees below zero up at the retreat center. Oh my, can you imagine? That's like 140 degree temperature difference. How is that even possible? So we had one person from there and one person from Argentina, a bunch of people from California. And I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, like I don't want anybody to die. So we did it very intentionally. There's actually a cold adaptation method that you can follow. And what happened is we followed this method. We accelerated it beyond what you would normally do because we were in a big group, and in a group environment, you get more comfortable doing things as well. But on your own, you would have spread this cold adaptation process out. So we compressed it quite a bit.
Is that because eyes are on you and you kind of like feel like you have to live up to more because you have a group setting?
Well, you know, when you're in a group setting, you get this sort of additional energy and group flow that you don't get elsewhere. And it makes you more comfortable doing things that you may not otherwise be able to do. Also, we had 4 days for the retreat that we had to compress cold adaptation into to allow people to experience the full gamut of what cold adaptation consists of. So normally when it would take 2, 3, 4 weeks to cold adapt, we were trying to do it in 4 days. And it was actually more successful than I thought possible.
Is Stephen Cantor, did he write that flow state book?
Oh, no, there's a couple people. There's a few. So there's one Csikszentmihalyi. He's a Czechoslovakian PhD, but he lives in the U.S. University of Chicago. He wrote 2 books on flow, and then the Flow Genome Project guys, which is Jamie Wheel and one other
That's
person.
who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I know I got the name wrong.
Yeah. There was someone who wrote Rise of Superman and a couple other books on flow state.
And his focus was on extreme athletes and surfers, where you're doing something so dangerous, you have no choice but to be in the moment. And it's very meditative to think about the flow state where it's just being in the ultimate moment to the point your body can do superhuman things.
Exactly.
Can you kind of break down the science behind or the neurochemistry behind the flow state and what's going on?
Yeah, so didn't expect to get into that conversation today, but absolutely. And maybe I'll remember his name by the end of it. So in flow, what's happening is time compresses. So almost always you feel like time slows down. It's called time dilation or time compression. And when that happens, you are able to tap more deeply into your neurochemistry, your neurobiology, your neurology to do things that you didn't think possible because you're basically digging deep. So there are a number of things that happen. During this time dilation, you start producing neurotransmitters to the point of if you took speed, cocaine, and all these other drugs all at once, they stimulate all this flow of neurochemicals all at once. That's what's happening in a flow state, is we get this like addictive rush that allows us to be super mentally and physically focused as if our life depended on it.
And it's not just adrenaline, right?
Adrenaline is one of the compounds
Yes.
that's increased, but there's epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine. There's all these things. I actually have a talk on YouTube about the flow state and what chemicals are increased and by how much, because we've studied all that. And because of that, we know that these chemicals are increased in the flow state. We also know that there's a cyclical path that you must follow to be in flow. You must first, if you're in flow, come out of flow after you're in flow. So if you're first in flow, you're eventually going to crash and be super depressed and go into this down period that can last anywhere from a few hours to a few days. And if you understand that being in a flow state comes with this depressed state afterwards, it's much easier to get through and not get stuck in. Then you go back to the phase of learning, talent, or skill acquisition that's just above your level of current skill so that you're always challenged. And then you kind of set everything aside and immediately get into a flow state, either through, intellectual work or as an athlete, there's some tension, some danger, or some life-threatening event that challenges your skill to its ultimate level, and everything else flows away. You're hyper-focused on one thing, and you've got more physical prowess than ever before, as well as mental capability.
Which is why athletes smoke marijuana. I know me personally as an athlete, that adrenaline words can't describe. And after you get done dropping 35 points and you're just, you got the W for your team, you come home and you're just, this dopamine dump happened and you're kind of sad. You're like, oh my gosh, same thing getting off stage.
Yep.
You have that ultimate high and it's like, it's this depression.
Yeah.
And then marijuana does fill that void a little bit and allow you to kind of get through that hiccup of your dopamine dump that happened.
It absolutely can. And so when some of those things are banned for professional athletes and professionals of all levels, it just seems crazy that you would do that. You've got to give them all the tools that they need to use to be optimally perform at their best all the time. And it's just insane. We take away some of those tools that are non-destructive.
Stephen Kotler is his name.
There we go. Thank you.
I knew we were in the vein. We just missed it a little bit with the needle. Stephen Kotler, he's very interesting. He's got a lot of high energy. And it was very interesting how he talked about how being in the flow state can actually help you learn a little bit more. So I'm glad how you broke it down, if you just upgrade kind of your potential and try to test your boundaries a little bit, you can actually get there quicker.
Absolutely. That's the key, is pushing the boundaries enough, but not too much.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're overwhelmed and you don't get into a flow state. You got to push to just above your current level of skill, and learning goes up about 500%. So 300 to 500% increase in knowledge acquisition.
Say that again, 30 to 35%?
No, 300 to 500% acquisition of skill and learning during a flow state. And that is why the military stimulates artificial flow states in their snipers. That's just one example. So they will use transcranial direct stimulation. So it's basically electric shocks to the brain using electricity. It's basically a wearable device. Biohackers have these all the time. A certain tuning of that stim device will put them into an artificial flow state and then allow them to perform sniper training at 300 times the usual level. So they can basically progress from their shooting to sniper expert level in less than half the time, sometimes less than a fifth the time that it would normally take a sniper to get up to speed by using these flow states.
Well, we're in your house. Are you holding out on me, Dad? Yeah. Lube me up, man.
Exactly.
Let's go, baby.
Secret biohacking toys of the military too. So
it's so interesting because these are it's awakening human potential. Especially in this 21st century, isn't that what we're all trying to do? Upgrade in this fast-paced world?
Absolutely. Well, if you think about the world today, the information that we have access to and the information coming into our sphere of awareness is so much higher than ever before. When you used to get information from talking to people, and then information from books, and then information from television, and now it's information from podcasts, books, and you can listen to those things at 3 times speed and just download that information faster. And there's information coming at you all the time. So you must upgrade yourself so that the new normal is a faster pace of working and thinking. So yes, everyone is trying to upgrade their potential. And if we know, we use 10% of our brain, well, how do we use more? Because there's tons more potential there. And that's what we're into right now, is this freedom of information from the internet is allowing us to experiment. So a lot of biohacking professionals are these self-experimenters. We want to experiment on ourselves to upgrade our own hardware and software, our brain, our mitochondria, and our biology to be better at what we do and to do more things that we enjoy doing.
So have you read up much about what Silicon Valley is doing with microdosing?
I haven't necessarily read as much as talked with a lot of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, and they're doing a couple of interesting things. So one, they do a lot of prescription medications, typically ones for ADHD and narcolepsy. So they're doing things like Provigil, which is modafinil.
You can't even get that now. Mayo Clinic, they prescribed me that. They gave me 2 runs with it, and then they flipped the script, and because it's not a high, it just allows you to focus. And stay up. But the thing is and you're still able to get sleep. Not like an Adderall or an SSRI that just keeps you wired, which is no fun.
Exactly.
But with Provigil, man, they quit prescribing it, and they said, no, you basically have to be a fighter pilot with narcolepsy to be able to get that off us, big boy.
Yeah, they made it much harder. There's actually 2 other compounds that they're using now that are prescription, and I can't remember the name. It's something like Vivix that they're all using. So those are the prescription ones. They tend to have downsides. So those are sometimes called smart drugs, and smart drugs have severe downsides for many people. Nootropics are the other things that both Wall Street and Silicon Valley is experimenting with. And nootropics are more natural, but also synthetic compounds that have no known or very limited side effects. So those are there. And then, of course, the microdosing is almost standard in Silicon Valley. And that's because you are at the microdose, you are unaffected visually by any kind of hallucinogen. You can still function just fine, but you are tapped into this wider consciousness that increases both your connectivity to fellow human, but also your creativity and just waves of thinking that you didn't have access to when you're so caught up in your head with all the stress that's normally going on around you.
You're just tuned in.
Absolutely.
And whether it's you're only using maybe 2% more of your brain, you're tapped into something and you can feel it. And Dennis McKenna actually broke it down for us on the importance of not microdosing LSD. And this is where Silicon Valley, I feel, has to do a little bit more research and talk to some professionals, because they should only be microdosing plant medicines, not using a compound like LSD, because of how, and if you listen back to me and Dennis's podcast, something happens with our neurotransmitters where it folds over on itself. And then what you experience from a blast-off LSD acid session, that's only supposed to happen every so often. You're not supposed to cake it every single day, because then it folds over and then it's blocked, as opposed to with natural plant medicines, it never folds over.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's something I didn't know. And I have always heard that there's, a number of ways to do the microdosing that people do, but I had not heard about the issue with LSD. That's really interesting.
Don't do it with LSD. Do it with psilocybin if you're going to do it. Also, we were talking about reishi mushrooms.
Yes.
Which is, honestly, I feel like reishi might be the mecca of mushrooms.
So this is one of the, so from a plant medicine standpoint, we talk about, entheogens being plant medicines, but also plant medicines, especially from the mushroom kingdom, there's so many different ways they can affect us, not just psilocybin that's in there, because there's lots of teaching and plant medicine benefits of the mushroom kingdom. And so the mushroom, it's not an animal, mineral, or vegetable. It's its own kingdom. Most people don't understand that. And some people actually call it like alien technology left on Earth for us to access. It's like a key for us to access these additional states of information and knowledge. So I think about it that way sometimes. And I think, mushrooms are one of the things that most people completely miss out on, just eating regular medicinal mushrooms, whether it's shiitake, whether it's reishi, all of these are often forgotten, and they provide so much information to our body. Just like we were talking about light information, the mushroom captures information from sunlight, from the ground, and from where it is, and then imparts that information to your body. So reishi is one of those that imparts immunological information, can help our immune system be stronger and to help us perhaps, live longer. But it's also called one of the teaching plants, where it kind of opens your mind and makes you more connected as well without any of the hallucinogen effects of other mushrooms.
Have you ever had kind of a groundbreaking experience yourself with in the psychedelia world?
Yes. And so
I always try to get one of these stories out of my guests.
I have to think about like how, because it's a really embarrassing story, but it was super powerful. And so I don't know if I'll tell you the exact specifics, but what I'll tell you is it was interestingly on a microdose, not on a macrodose of a mushroom. And so when I was experimenting with microdosing, I had a very specific problem, and I wasn't going to microdose to fix this problem. It was a problem that I had had for 10 plus years, and I tried everything to solve that problem. Nothing that I did, and I mean nothing, fixed it. So at one time that I microdosed, I had been microdosing for a little while, and all of a sudden it hit me really, sometimes on microdoses you don't feel, and sometimes they're very powerful. And so this was one of those very powerful things where I had to sit down and just stop and just look around and say, okay, like this is an experience right here. And so instead of, kind of turning my attention back to what I was doing, I took the time to just sit with myself and go inside. And so I went inside and said, you know what, this is a really good time to kind of snip these cords of this issue that's been bothering me for 10 years. And I mean, I tried medications, I tried physical things, I tried mental things, I tried everything. And so I spent literally 15 minutes. I went inside my body and I told my body what I wanted it to do from then on. And it has been 2 years. And I had that problem every day. It's been 2 years. I've never had that problem again. It's 100% solved from one microdosing session. It was an extremely embarrassing and hard to talk about problem that is completely solved today through that one microdose. It was phenomenal.
So was it like, did you reframe and just perceive it differently? Or how do you think that came about where it's completely gone?
Yeah, I didn't reframe. I went into the area of my body that I had the most problem with, and then I told it what I wanted to have happen. So instead of saying, I'm worried about this problem, or this is the thing that's going on, I basically said, here's what I want you to do, and I want you to do that from now on, and then that just happened from now on. I mean, just from that day forward.
It's crazy, man. I had that happen this past November down in Costa Rica. I always had a problem with my right Achilles and my right knee. And it was all stemming from this deep, deep corner in my right gut. And I would worry about my right hip as well and my right sciatic. And it was all stemming from there. So I discovered it in my brain under the influence of ayahuasca. And then I went deep into it. And I spent, like you're saying, 15, 20 minutes just focusing on it. And then all of a sudden you just feel this tension and your entire body just loosens up. And it's because you become aware of an issue. And then you are able to digest it and then move on.
Exactly.
And that's kind of the power of any plant medicine, is that's what it's supposed to do. People get afraid of marijuana, for instance. Well, because they say it makes you paranoid. Yes, it's supposed to make you paranoid. You're supposed to think deeply on issues you might be having. And so often people they have these issues in their life and they don't want to explore them. So they don't like to smoke marijuana. And that's your prerogative, but don't say that the medicine isn't doing what it's supposed to do because you got made paranoid.
Exactly. Yeah, the paranoia is a part that just like, hey, look at this and explore it a little bit. Don't run away from it. And that's the thing most people need to learn, and that I needed to learn. 2-3 years ago, I had to learn whenever these negative feelings come up and these thoughts, we don't want to keep pushing them down like hot air balloons that we're pushing down. Eventually they pop back up when you least expect it. And then you get angry and you have this blowout and you're like, what just happened? It's like all those emotions you suppressed for so long just bubbled right up. So stop doing that.
You got what you wanted.
You got to just let those come up and explore them once in a while.
Accept them.
Exactly.
Make friends with them. That's kind of...
Welcome them.
Yeah, welcome them. That's the journey I've been on, where it's like, man, over the last year, I've brought on more stress onto my life, just from doing events and things that biting off more than I can chew.
Yeah.
But the thing is when we test our limits and push our boundaries, kind of like the fire and ice retreat, where it's like, no, you can do this. First step is show up. Second step, take the dive, baby.
Exactly.
That's why I like think tanks and like beehives, because it's like if I see 3 people do it in front of me, what do I got to lose?
Exactly.
You know, it can be done.
Yep, it can be done. You know it can be done. Other people did it comfortably and they smiled doing it, and so can you.
Okay, so it's starting to turn into a circus in here. I have one more question, and I think this is very important, Thaddeus, with what we see popping up in our communities. 5G technology. It's a slippery slope. And we were talking about how we're guinea pigs right now. I really feel this is probably the mecca of us being guinea pigs, because it's not just going to affect us genetically, it's going to affect our mental states as well. Can you kind of break down the 5G technology, the dangers of it, and what might happen from it?
Yeah. This is, so we've talked about like these dangers of other things throughout the ages. So every age has kind of its own danger and its own thing. And then sometimes it gets solved. We created the EPA in the 1970s because of DDT and Silent Spring. Then we created all of these activities that slowed down these toxins that were going to our body. But the one ignored toxin is also something like tobacco. And tobacco had all the studies that showed tobacco is damaging and really bad for you and cause cancer. And that was ignored. It was played down purposefully. Okay, so all those people that learned what big tobacco did wrong are now the wireless industry. They have more lobbyists in Congress than the pharmaceutical industry. They have billions that they spend lobbying Congress because they know, because we have 5,000 studies starting in the 1970s showing that wireless radiation is damaging to humans. It is 100% known, 100% proven, and they know they're going to get sued and have to pay a giant chunk of money for harming our health. There is no insurance company that will insure the wireless companies against health damage because they all know nobody wants to take that bet because they're going to lose. So it's a matter of time before this happens, and it is being covered up for you and me that this is happening, and that the dangers of microwave and cellular radiation are real and known. So the U.S. government has thousands of studies that already prove this. You can go to bioinitiative.org, and it lists every single one of the studies that has ever been done. So if you want to do your own research, that's where you would go. But 5G. So what's the difference between 1G, 2G, 3G, and 4G? So those are all just different frequencies of wireless technology that transmit from a radio antenna, a cell tower, to your phone. It's a wavelength, a frequency of light that carries information. And it went from a gigahertz to 2 gigahertz, now up to 3 or 4 gigahertz of carrying information. 5G doesn't go from 4 gigahertz to 5 gigahertz. It goes from 5 gigahertz to 99 gigahertz. It opens up spectrums all the way as high as we think we can get and below 1G that have never been opened up before. So it basically opens up every spectrum of communication that we can use, not just this little band, but all bands. The issue with 5G is it's more powerful than any of the other, but it also goes further. It can't go through buildings. It can't go through trees. It can't go through walls, which means we have to put more cell towers everywhere to communicate with each other for 5G. So you're going to get a cell tower pretty much on every single person's house or in front of their house on the streetlights to make these things communicate faster, closer together. That means that you're going to be inundated with way more microwave radiation. So right now we're inundated with 10 with 18 zeros after it, more microwave radiation than ever in the history of man. That changes how our cells interact with sunlight. So what the issue is A, this has been proven and linked to depression and anxiety. Why is everyone getting depressed and anxious? Because they're around microwave radiation from Wi-Fi and cell all the time. The more people using cell phones around you, the more radiation you're exposed to. The more cell towers in line of sight, the more radiation you're exposed to. And 5G compounds that hundreds of times. And because of the waveforms the engineers are using in 5G, they are different than the waveforms in 1, 2, 3, and 4G. That will affect what is called topological insulator. So it's a technical term for your skin. Your skin surface knows how to read sunlight to make vitamin D. When we mess that up with 5G, we can no longer absorb sunlight to make vitamin D with our skin. You can stand outside on the equator in the middle of the sun naked and not get vitamin D, which is the number one hormone to prevent cancer, because 5G is messing up your body's ability to recognize how to do that. So that's number one. All these cancers can increase because of that. Ionizing radiation is like from x-rays and such, and we know that causes DNA break. What microwave radiation does is it causes the same DNA damage, but through a different mechanism, not by heating your skin and not by breaking DNA directly. It floods your cell with calcium, called calcium influx. So much calcium gets into your cell because the microwave radiation opens the calcium channels of your cell, floods with calcium. That's a toxin to your cell. It immediately creates all these free radicals and can damage or kill the cell because there's so much calcium pouring into it. The 5G increases that by hundreds of thousands of times. And you're just going to be around it all the time because they need so much bandwidth. So basically this 5G is going to increase people's mitochondrial response to all the microwave radiation. It's going to make people more sick, and it's going to make a lot more people sick at once than we've ever seen because the density of the 5G has to be so thick just to have these towers communicate. And the whole purpose of that is to steal your data because they want to know what are all your habits. What do you buy? What kind of milk do you buy? How quickly do you go through the milk? When do you buy new milk? Because now, once they have all that data from every single thing you do, they can market endlessly to you and sell you products that you probably don't need because they just want all that data for free because you're going to voluntarily use the 5G network.
I feel like it's getting gluttonous because they're already doing that. Shoot, we do that to sell events. Our Gary V event, we tapped into all people who are interested in real estate, but we're doing it to provide value. We can be talking about, hey, I need to get toilet paper, and I have to get toilet paper. And before I know, Jeff Bezos is hitting me with an ad from Amazon. Yes, I'm going to go on Amazon Prime regardless because that's where I shop nowadays. But it almost seems like they are getting gluttonous with how they're trying to control consumers. On top of all the towers, because you're spot on. I spent 2 hours the other night just reading about what they're going to have to do with these 5G towers, to the point they have to disguise them as trees because they have to have them on every corner so they can talk to each other. That's dangerous. So is there a way for us to ramp up our genetic code right now? Can I just be popping more vitamin D than usual on a daily basis to prep myself for this, or is there no preparation?
Yeah, so there's definitely preparation and mitigation. It is challenging, and some people that have lower redox, so more compromised immune system, less ability to recover and regenerate cells, they're going to be compromised first. Some of us can last a lot longer in a 5G environment, but all of us have to mitigate and respond to the damage that we're going to be getting. The way you respond is two ways. So one, get as far away from population centers as possible, because the more people using cell phones and putting up the 5G towers, the more radiation you're exposed to. Second, if you're in a high population density, or you've got to go to work around all that stuff, what are you going to do? So your home can be designed to block all of those things. I don't care what 5G meter is outside your house, and they're actually embedding them in every streetlight. So if you've noticed, around everyone, they're putting in these LED streetlights, and they're replacing the poles. Inside the streetlight pole is the 5G antenna, and they're doing that in every neighborhood that I've seen. It's just crazy because they need to disguise the antennas because there's so many.
Yep.
So how do you block that? You can block it. So you can block it with metal. So metal blocks all these signals. So you can side your house with metal siding. You can put a metal roof over your house because Elon Musk wants to blast 5G from the sky west of the Mississippi. East of the Mississippi, it's going to come from the poles. That's where we are pretty much, is east. And so we're going to get it from the ground.
You over here in Wisconsin.
That's right.
Not us over in Minnesota.
That's right. You Minnesotans are going to be getting blasted from the sky.
As long as it's coming from Elon, I'm okay with it.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
So you can block it. There's technologies, whether it's metal or certain things you can paint your walls with to block it. So you should really be trying to figure out how to block at least just your bedroom. Sleep is, we all know we're going to sleep for 7 to 8 hours a night, and that's when we need to recover. And if we're getting blasted with 5G while we sleep, we are not going to recover. So shield your bedroom somehow. Figure it out. You can look up online how to shield it. Ground and get natural sunlight. That is the way to build your redox, is A, sunlight, B, grounding, C, get cold adapted. All of those things build your redox and make you more resilient to all these things in your environment, regardless of what they are.
I'm glad I asked that, because I was just studying it on my own the other night because I knew that we're ramping up for 5G. I didn't know that you were going to know this much about it. And I just wrote down 5G. I have to ask him about it. It's so interesting to see kind of where we're going to be in 2 years, even, because we've already seen how fast the internet has moved over the last 10 years.
Huge.
Now to see where we're going to be in 2 years, all we can be is proactive and play the prevention game.
Yeah, you're never going to get away from it no matter what you do. And so we, in August of this year, we had another retreat, which was called the EMF free retreat. And we had the EMF experts from the US come and present at that retreat and teach all of us about 5G, EMF, how to identify it, what the issues are with it, what all the research has said over the years, why it's been hidden, and then how to protect yourself. That was our entire retreat this summer.
Do you have that recorded?
It is 100% recorded. And so far, I have not been given permission to release those on YouTube yet. If I can get permission, I really want to release them because those talks were so good.
Can you slide it under the table for me?
We'll see what we can do.
I actually have to ask you one more question, and it's regarding copper pyramids. Have you ever experimented with them, like above your bed, or meditated underneath one, built one yourself? Have you?
I have never. So I have heard of this, of sacred geometry and the pyramid. So I have a friend who has a pyramid above his bed, a lodestone on his pillow next to him, and he puts all of his products that he sells under a pyramid before he ships them out to customers. Mm-hmm. But I have very little knowledge of what the pyramid is actually doing. So no, I'm actually interested to learn.
Well, this opens up Pandora's box for our second conversation in about 3 months, because we are going to try to get you involved with Meeting of the Minds come November. I'll break down those pillars for you once we get off the air. Because it's very exciting with where it's growing, where it's going to go, and how far we're going to push it. Because if we're dealing with the Mayo Clinic, we have to do it correctly.
Absolutely.
And I know your mind is one that can get us there. Thaddeus, I appreciate you, brother.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.